Simply put, simply put.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of the Simply Put podcast, where we have conversations about difficult topics in simple terms with extraordinary people. And today we have a very special guest. He's played for the NFL since 2009 for the Saints and Eagles. He's a two-time Super Bowl champ, three-time Pro Bowl safety, and has just a ridiculous stat sheet. But what's even more honorable about him is that he's a man of action. He started his own nonprofit back in 2010, has spent years running others and contributing to grassroots organizations, and he's just gotten his hands dirty, speaking up and making moves about the issues in our criminal justice system, our educational systems, and just serving people. He's also producing a film that's in its final stages of production called Black Boys, and he just recently joined CNN officially as a contributor, and he even has two daughters. Everybody, welcome to the show, Malcolm Jenkins. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. How you doing, brother?
I am doing awesome, bro. Yeah, let's just get right into it. The first question I wanted to ask you is that you said that in one of your interviews that you try to further educate yourself by having conversations and listening to people who oppose your beliefs and the work that you're doing, like people who say that racism does not exist, for example. What have you learned about people who believe that, and how do you respond to them?
Well, I think what I've realized about people who in 2020 in this age believe that racism doesn't exist is that they're willfully ignoring history, present context, and everything around them. Yeah. And they're living kind of in this bubble, this fantasy bubble. Our country was founded on racism. Our systems, our entire society has racism, woven in its fabric. It's part of the American way. Yeah. And I think right now what we're wrestling to do is untether ourselves from our past. And a lot of what we're realizing today is that we don't really even have an accurate depiction or an accurate account of our past. Right. And so, right now it's to the point where anybody who's saying that racism doesn't exist is, like I said, is willfully ignorant, and I'm willing to have it's not even worth trying to convince people that anymore. Mm-hmm. I think everybody now, especially in the context of today, is well aware that, racism exists. The thing that people have to understand, and I think what we struggle with, is the difference between interpersonal relationship or racism and systemic racism. Right. And I think we've had this idea because it's no longer, before 2020, it was no longer cool for somebody to walk up to you and call you the N-word or anything, this overt racism. Right. So that's kind of dissipated a little bit because we as Americans don't really have a stomach for that anymore. And so we had this idea that racism is gone, but really interpersonal racism and systemic racism have always been synonymous. And it wasn't until we got rid of kind of the interpersonal racism that we thought we were in this post-racial America, but we never got rid of those systems. Yeah. And so if we look at all of the disparities amongst the line of race in our educational system, our criminal justice system, housing, anything, the wealth gap, Black people are at the bottom of every single one of those. And so our systems, you can't say they aren't racist because the data shows otherwise, unless you believe that Black people just innately don't achieve, much, that are innately more violent, commit more crime, which I don't think anybody does. And so you start to look at more. I think
some people do.
Well, I mean, if they do, then those are not people that we're worth having the conversation, with. If you believe that in your heart that Black people are just naturally, no matter where you put them on earth, just more violent, more aggressive, like dumber or inferior, then you're just a white supremacist, and there's nothing that I'm going to waste my time saying to convince you otherwise. But for those people who participate in kind of our country and our society, who participate in the systems but don't consider themselves racist, you have to be able to show them, while you might not hate Black people, that is not the only way to participate in racism, or that's not the only way that racism is perpetuated. And we have to break down, what's happening in our school systems, what's happening in our prisons, what's happening in our courts, what's happening in our streets. Like all of these things matter and perpetuate kind of the the racial divide that we have in our country.
Right. Can you give, like, just for some people who may not be as aware and wanting to learn more, give like a few examples of systemic racism that are still currently affecting us today?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at, the war on drugs, for instance, and how, large that effect was on Black people, because you had an administration that decided, okay, we're going to we don't want drugs, in our communities. It's destroying the fabric of society, but put in policy that wanted to attack cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a 100-to-1 ratio, which meant that pure cocaine would be penalized differently than crack cocaine. The
Mm-hmm.
only difference is baking soda.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference between the two, it's cocaine and baking soda.
Yeah.
But the locations where you found powder, you found regular cocaine in Wall Street and in white neighborhoods and in the elites of society. You
Mm-hmm.
found crack in Black neighborhoods in the hood where there was poverty and things like that. Yeah. And if I had one powder or one, let's say, sugar pack of powder cocaine, and I had it would be the equivalent of having, one pack of crack cocaine would be equivalent of me having 100 packs of pure cocaine. And so when you talk about how we're penalizing people and who the effects on, we can call it a war on drugs, but the effects really ended up being a war on Black communities because we weren't trying to eradicate drugs across the board from everybody. It was specifically in these places, in the effects of that, the amount of people that went to jail for it, the amount of families that were stripped of fathers, mothers, leaders, communities that were completely decimated. And now we're starting to see a new resurgence on this kind of war on drugs, but we're treating it completely different because now we're looking at opioids and these addictions and who's getting affected by it. And now we're talking about it more so on a public health issue, that we need to be addressing this, not from a punitive type of lens, but we need to be thinking about this as like a health issue and how do we provide treatments. And that's how we really should have, done that in the past. And I think those two, the way that we handle those things have direct effects on Black people. And that's an example of how systems can be inherently racist, even without anybody ever saying the N-word or doing anything like that.
Right. Yeah, man. So you personally, did you experience, or what kinds of forms of racism did you experience growing up in Jersey?
Like for me, interpersonal racism really never, I've experienced it, but it really never registered with me because I believe racism has something to do with power, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody who, is my peer, has no authority over me, can't change anything in my life, who, may say something racist or treat me racist, that really, to me, I just ignored that. That's just kind of the way things are. That doesn't bother me as a person. Yeah. But it's once you get to, somebody like a police officer or a principal, or a teacher, somebody who has some kind of authority over you, who then can, actually affect your life. And I've seen that done, not only with my family, my younger brother. I remember being home one time, and my brother got in trouble for having a little bit of weed on him when he was like 19. And after that point, the police would always kind of mess with him. Anytime they see him out, they pull him over, they harass him, whatever. And I was in his car one night. I was back, it's probably like 2-3 in the morning. I'm driving back home, and I get pulled over out of nowhere. The officer tells me I ran a red light. The intersection he said I ran was like 1.5 miles away. So I'm like, how did I just get pulled over? And once he realized that I wasn't my brother, and I was able to tell him, like, my high school coach is a detective in my hometown. Yeah. So I told him, I said, well, I live here. I'm from here. You can call Dan Higgins, and he'll tell you who I am. I played for him. And then it was like, oh, all of a sudden the demeanor changed. Right. Here's your license back. Go ahead, slow down. And I realized that they were looking for my brother. And it's things like that it comes down to. As a football player, luckily, I've created enough value for other institutions to build protections around myself. Yeah. Right? I had a coach that I know would vouch for me and create protection. I played for Ohio State, a great university, and I'm one of their star players. If anything, if somebody's to violate my rights, I have an institution that will come protect me. I'm an NFL player. I'm valuable to somebody who will protect me. But people like my brother and, the majority of us out here, citizens who don't have those type of protections, all will have their rights violated, will have their pride and their dignity and decency violated because they don't have protections. And that's why I say racism is very much about power and their ability to kind of impose, your will on somebody else who does not have the protections built into our systems.
Yeah. I've speaking on that, I've actually had people share with me something that sounds like the fact that you are where you're at now with your influence, or for example, for you, the fact that you're in the NFL right now proves that you climbed the ladder, which they believe proves that racism does not exist, and that's just BS. Because they could point to the fact that you have wealth now, relationships, fame, or influence. Do you think that that's true, or how would you respond to a remark like that?
Well, my response would be, well, if I took those things away, would I still have the same protections? And if not, then racism still exists.
Right.
If I have to be the best in the world at what I do in order to be protected as a human being and to have my rights, intact and to walk the same way that my white peers do, if I have to literally be the best in the world at what I do and have, people value my work to have that protection, then I say, okay, well, what happens if I'm not that? Right. And if it changes, then we have racism.
Yeah, it affects your value as a person,
Right. Who am I as a person besides who I am on the field?
Exactly. So I know you've seen and heard and said and done a lot about injustices against Black men in America. So you've also got some wisdom, understanding, perspective that a lot of people don't have. What's your personal opinion on where America is heading right now in the midst of all this social, political, and cultural unrest?
I am, as somebody who's been kind of in it, and there's been, mind you, there's people who've been in this way longer than me. But as somebody who's been kind of on this track for a few years now, I'm skeptical, or at least, I'm concerned that we don't allow this to just be a moment, right?
Yeah,
that
where
people are feeling guilty and we are kind of guilt tripping ourselves into making statements, making comments without really putting anything into action. And so I'm encouraging people to not only, post things on social media, not only hashtag Black Lives Matter and go march and things like that, but it's like, what are you researching? What are you doing from a local level in your elections? Are you voting? Are you learning about our systems so that you know how to dismantle them? Are you understanding or learning how you might even participate in these systems? And I think it's bigger than just police brutality as well. I think, George Floyd's death obviously sparked this worldwide kind of awakening. And a lot has been put on police brutality, which it should be. But there are so many other areas that I think that this is a moment not only to make just small reforms, but this is a moment in which we can actually create the community and society that we actually want, this equal society. This is an opportunity where there's so much awareness being made. There's so many people sitting still because of COVID-19 that we can actually turn our systems on its head and create a country that actually lives up to the creed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch a little bit more on the police brutality side, proportionally, it's been against Black men far more than anybody else. But there's also the Breonna Taylors, Sandra Bland's, Atiana Jefferson's. So for you, as a father of Black daughters, 2 Black daughters, when you hear about things like that, I'm sure it has, but it made you think about what you'll say to them when they're old enough to have the talk. What might you say? What are some things that you are planning on?
And I think that's one of the things that when we talk about, the deaths, oftentimes it's the Black men that we focus on. that end up dying. But there are plenty of Black women that get brutalized and manhandled the same way, and oftentimes don't get as much as attention. And when I see these videos of teenage girls getting body slammed by officers or officers that are in schools and things like that, I, as a father, you realize that at that point, there's nothing that child can do, right? It's out of their control. They are completely at the will of this grown man. And that is the biggest fear for me, because you have two conflicting thoughts. I know for me, I want to be able to make sure that my kids are safe, that they don't get any kind of harm to them, and that they survive any encounters that they might have in these situations. So you want to tell them to, follow instructions, be polite, do whatever you have to do to survive. Don't make yourself threatening, just do what you got to do. We can deal with it later if, your rights are violated. But at the same time, as a Black man who wants to raise two Black girls who are proud of who they are, who recognize themselves as full human beings who can stand on their rights and who they are, that's conflicting to me, because both of those thoughts can't control. I want them to be able to stand on their rights just like their white peers. If they're being violated, they should be able to say something. If somebody's wronging them, they should be able to say something. They shouldn't be afraid or make themselves feel less human because of somebody else's authority. But at the same time, I want my kids to survive this encounter, and I don't want any harm being done to them. And unfortunately, that's a dilemma that my mom had to face, that my mother's mom had to face, and that every Black parent out there has to have these conversations with their children. And, for me, I'm going to choose to make sure that they exercise their full rights as a human being first. And hopefully, nothing happens to them, or nothing, they don't have to get into these situations. But if they do, I always want them to be, to feel like they are full human beings, because they should feel that way. I don't want them to have to belittle themselves because society says so, because some authority figure says so. But I also know, I want them to be well aware of all of the risks that are out there as well.
Right. Can you remember personally when you had to talk with your mom, or multiple talks, or the first time she brought it up to you? What was that like for you?
I didn't really get it until I was an adult. My mom, especially when I was in high school, I'm going out, and she would stay up until whenever I came in. So sometimes I came in late, she'd be sitting on the couch, waiting, wouldn't go to sleep. Or I'd sneak in, and I'm thinking the coast is clear because I don't hear anything. I just hear it out the room, like, "Is that you?" And like, yeah, she could not go to sleep unless I came back into the house. And I'm like, I couldn't really understand it. As a kid, you're like, I'm fine with my friends, we being safe. I'm not a bad kid. I'm not doing crazy stuff. Yeah. But I also now understand how many things can go wrong for a Black boy in this country. And and that is completely out of my control. And I think that's the things that are scary. You can teach your kid to be respectful, to, follow the rules, to be a good kid. You can do everything you can do as a parent. That still is not going to eradicate all of the situations out there that your kids are going to be in that might be out of their control. They might actually do everything right and still end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's a scary thing. I know and she's still dealing with that, especially, with as vocal as I've been, on these issues and kind of pushing out. I know she still worries for my safety, as a Black man. And she's raised 3 boys. And so now somebody who's raising my own kids, I understand fully, what her concerns are, what her fears are, because you fear the worst, that you see it on TV, you see these videos of mothers who've been stripped of their children, over something stupid, over something very petty. And as a parent, I think that's your greatest fear, to be in those shoes.
Yeah, man. Can you talk a little bit about Since the killing of George Floyd and all these protests, Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, released a video where he said he was wrong for the NFL's response to taking a knee and denounced racism against Black people in all forms. Do you think it was legit or sincere? What are your thoughts on that video, if you feel comfortable sharing?
I had mixed feelings about it because I've been in these conversations with the NFL for a few years now, and quite frankly, they talked about how he talked about how they didn't listen to players, they didn't do what they needed to do, but in reality, they put up a ton of money. They created some really powerful PSAs about police brutality, especially when Rock Nation got involved. They've done things, right? And so they've listened before. The problem or the issue with the NFL is they've yet to address in a serious way the Colin Kaepernick issue. And so no matter what they do, it's almost going to fall on deaf ears from the public because they've yet to really address the elephant in the room. And so, I didn't know, I had mixed emotions about it because I'm like, nah, you've done these things before. You've listened. You just need to address who you need to address. And it needs to be Colin Kaepernick. And hopefully, he gets a shot. But, if not, they at least acknowledge his contribution to this entire movement that now everybody's joining. He's saying Black Lives Matter. It's like, well, who brought that to your attention 4 years ago? That's what I think everybody wants to hear, and we've yet to hear that. And I think, until then, it's going to be hard for people to take anything that they say seriously or with any kind of, or to think that it's genuine because those two things kind of conflict.
Yeah. I know one of the things that they're planning on doing, if the season starts back up again in July, is having the Black National Anthem played before games. That's one thing that will be different, I guess. But what else do you think will be changed? And what even is your opinion on that?
But I don't know who gave them that idea. But I was like, I don't know what that changes. I don't know who that changes or like who requested that, who signed off on it. But, I think everybody at this point, like, we don't care about empty gestures, right? We want real action. And if there's anything that I know about large corporations like the NFL with a ton of political power, with a ton of capital, they can change laws. They lobby all the time to get their business interests, leveraged. Take that same power that y'all have and push it to some of these issues that we're talking about, right? We want to see you. We want to see you talk about private prisons and the bail system. We want to talk about, the inequities in our educational system. Like, those are the things that we want y'all to do, and not just with a PSA or a statement, but with real political will, right? And that is what I think we need to be pressuring, not only just corporations like the NFL, but every business, and I think that's one of the things that we've got to be really careful about in this space, is because we created an environment where we're paying attention to who's not talking, right? And if you're not making statements, and we're like, oh, we see you, and we're attacking people who are quiet. And so people are just making statements to not be on the wrong side.
And then saying the wrong thing and getting canceled for that.
Right. And so, but then you look further into it and like, okay, out of all of these companies who said Black Lives Matter, how many of you invest or put money into private prisons? How many of you, have business interests in the same things that are oppressing Black lives? Like, and those are the things that we need to be paying attention to, and making sure that we are addressing these issues with our votes first, but also with our dollars, and understanding and pointing out who are the people that are perpetuating these systems, who are the ones that are financing it, that are supporting it, that are benefiting and banking off of it, and then make sure that we focus our attention on those people, because until we put pressure really on their their money and their business interests, like they're not gonna move. You know, that the statements are hollow. They don't do anything. They make them look good. They protect their company. They protect their customers for continuing to come back. I feel good because, you know, this company said Black Lives Matter. But unless they are actually moving, unless we were making them move, it's really empty.
A couple years ago, the NFL, before all this went down, they responded to NFL players who were taking a knee by issuing a policy that required all players to stand during the national anthem or they'd be punished and fined. You responded by raising your fist in the air, correct?
They actually put that out there, and the response, they put that out there in the offseason, and the response from players in our player union was very, very strong. And before the season actually got started, they ended up tabling that. And so it has never been, you know, against any rules or policy to protest, which I'm glad, because there are other leagues like the NBA has that rule where players cannot kneel before or during the national anthem, and that came from Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, you know, back in the day. And you know, it was very important that we at least protected our right to, you know, demonstrate peacefully if we so choose.
But it just became like an extremely, it still didn't make anything like much easier with just the cultural climate. So how did you and your teammates respond to or handle just all the pressure, just comments flying left and right? I know just even being a celebrity and athlete, you got to just develop thick skin anyway. But during that time, what was it like, I guess, in the locker rooms with your teammates or just being a member of the NFL?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we got to understand now is just it was tough because there was only a few of us, right, that are actually protesting and actually out there. And even in our locker rooms of 53 guys, you had maybe 1, 2, 3 guys that would be protesting. And now you look at kind of the country, and everybody's, you know, up in arms. And I'm like, you know, I'm very proud of those few guys who early on, especially, you know, Colin, but even the few that followed in his footsteps that stuck to it. That was hard to do. And, you know, with all of the scrutiny, with all of the things that were going on, they stood up. And, you know, and now hopefully we continue to build off that momentum.
What do you think that the NFL needs to do? Like just 3 solid things that you feel would make a big shift, something that they could do now or even going into next year that could really make some changes.
Yeah, what I want every, you know, company to do first, right, is if you're going to outwardly, you know, proclaim that Black Lives Matter and that you value, you know, Black people, and you want to be a part of the change and the movement, then the first thing you need to do is look in your own home, right? And you look at the NFL, they have 1 Black general manager and I think 3 Black head coaches. When they put in the Rooney Rule years ago, I believe those numbers were around the same. And so you look at a league that is 70% Black when it comes to its players, but when you come to the decision makers and the leadership, there are very few Black people there. 0 Black owners, 0 Black presidents, and like I said, 1 Black GM and 3 Black head coaches. That to me is something that needs to change. The Rooney Rule was something that was put into place to try to create more diversity, or try to, you know, put policy in place to mandate more diversity, but the mentality has never changed as far as the hiring practices. And so we need to they need to first, I think, start there, and then start to look outwardly on some other things that they can help with society.
Yeah. Okay. So now off the field though, you personally are doing like a whole bunch of incredible things for not just your community, but a bunch of communities, for youth, underserved, especially through your foundation. You got the football cheer camp, the football and cheer camp, college tour, project rewards, summer STEAM camp, your virtual program for navigating digital, social media world, sharpening your mind, career preparation. What do you attribute to your desire and even just action to be so active in so many different areas?
I have an urgency, man. Like, I feel like while I have this stage and this platform, I want to maximize it. And that's really what it comes down to. And I have the ability and the resources to do it. And so for me, I have a great example, with my dad of what, an impact you can have when you just use your resources to impact the sphere of influence that you have. He's just a neighborhood dad who, has 3 boys, but looked out for the other kids who were in the neighborhood. So my mom is the president of the foundation. She helped me start it back in 2010. So this is actually our 10-year anniversary, and I did a ton.
Congratulations, man! That's what's up.
Yeah, man. It's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
She's really kind of the feet on the ground, man, and makes it all happen. But I was doing a lot of work in college. Jim Tressel was my coach, and he preached, about doing a lot of things in the community and being a better citizen than a football player. My fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, had me very active in the community. So when I got to New Orleans, I was doing some of the things with the team. We go read to kids, we go, do food drives, things like that. But it was a little bit unorganized. And in 2010, my mom said, like, how do we focus your, philanthropy on, a specific issue to have an impact that we can actually measure? And so we started with a program in New Orleans, and really, and it expanded that over the last, 4 or 10 years to 4 different states. So we serve Ohio, where I went to school, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And it's all about providing experiences. And one of the things I know I learned more than any academics that I went to, any school, was getting out of my own environment into a new environment and experiencing different things. That just even opened up my eyes to what was available to me. And a lot of times we see kids that are trapped in their own environments and only believe that the ways out are the only ones that they see. So I'm out to sell drugs, I'm gonna play basketball, I'm gonna entertain, and they don't even see themselves in a lot of these other, professions that are out there. So we take kids from all over, kind of out of their environments, and bring them, onto college campuses, take them on college tours, give them internships with other leaders and business owners from the community. We have academic supports, we do food drives, but all of these things I'm a very hands-on person. So a lot of our programs are in person. And with COVID, we've had to really cancel or table almost all of our programs this year. But it also provided an opportunity for us to move to a more virtual experience. So we launched what we called our Power Pathways.
It's basically like master classes, right?
Yes, essentially. What we want to create is master classes for, people who, not only kids who might be, going to colleges, but also, and really more specifically for those who might take a non-traditional route. Those who might go from high school right into the workforce. So how do we prepare you with the skills that you need for simple things like Zoom, how to conduct a Zoom call, how to do PowerPoint, how to do MailChimp, all of these things that you will need in today's, workforce, but also being able to tell stories of people who, went those alternative routes and had success.
Right.
Because oftentimes you have to see yourself. I know I am one of those people. I have to be able to see it before I can do it. But once I see it, like my imagination will take over. Right. So that's really what the foundation is about, man. It's just planting seeds of vision into people for themselves, and then creating an environment to allow them to thrive on the talent that they already have.
Yo, I peeped you got Wes Pendleton on there. How do you know him? That's my friend. Wes Pendleton, producer. You know him from Philly?
So what we have so far is just people that we've just watched. So I don't even know everybody on there. We just we've seen people that we've seen their stories and congregated. And right now we're in the process of really creating original content and really telling people's stories and allowing them to kind of be direct to camera, direct to the students about this is my path, this is my story, this is how I made it, and this is how it relates to you. So we'll be building that out over the next coming months. Yeah,
that's and you mentioned it before, but that's just so good for helping people to see what else is possible like, well, just that representation allows people to be like, yo, I can see myself doing this too. It's just possible for me. Like, I studied film theory in college, and one thing that really struck me was how in Hollywood, just the representation, for example, at the Oscars, the Academy Awards, every single Academy Award that's been won by a Black person has been for a role or the vast majority of them has been for roles that deem us as either slaves or criminals or sexually promiscuous, or things that just these negative stereotypes. Like, the representation is like not cool, and it really just breaks my heart, man. It because it's this narrative that's continuing to tell us in our society how we should act, what we should look like, and what's possible for us. So with your movie that's coming out soon that you're producing, like, what do you hope that people will glean from that? And like, just share more with us about it.
Yeah, so Black Boys is a documentary that really explores the spectrum of humanity of Black boys. And to your point, we only usually see kind of two versions of ourselves. It's like the worst kind of stereotypical version of Black people, and then the antithesis of that, where we try to present like our best selves, right? The most successful kind of life. But we skip over, all of the different versions of us. Like, Black people are not monolithic.
Right.
And so we want to be able to show, that Black boys are more than just their physical bodies. Oftentimes we get depicted as physically stronger. You see us in sports and all these other things, but we also have a mind that's also neglected most times. We also have feelings. We have joy. We have pain. We cry. And so just really exploring that and understanding how early we start to condition. Like you talked about, those awards, but even as early as, grade school, we talk to Black educators, and they talk about how less than 2% of educators out there are Black men. And so what that tells Black boys out of the gate is, when you never see a Black man in front of your classroom, is you never see yourself as a teacher. You look at the posters in your school, the heroes and people they idolize, you never see yourself. When you read books, the literature that you read, they're never Black heroes. The principal, the board of education, never Black people. And so you already take in those things, that those places are not for me. And so you learn through kind of this window. You see the world through somebody else's experience, where white kids see themselves in the literature, they see themselves in posters in the room, they see themselves in the teacher, the principal, the board, and they know that these things are for me. And so it's like, how do we create a new narrative and make sure that we are showcasing our full selves and the different versions of ourselves and celebrating that. And I think, for me, I started my production company, Listen Up, about a year ago, specifically to do that, to tell Black stories, to dive into social issues, but also to really just put us on display, in all of us. Because I think, for us to really be seen as humans, we have to be shown, in our full kind of humanity. And I think that's important, that we do that storytelling.
Yeah. Something you mentioned in the beginning of that answer was just about, only 2% of teachers are Black men. I want to ask you a little bit about, like, how you think masculine or perceived masculinity roles play into, or like masculinity stereotypes play into who we end up trying to become as a whole, or generally. You follow what I'm saying? Like,
I think, that's a whole nother debate. I've had many conversations about how Black masculinity has kind of been under attack, but also there's, like I said, there's always a yin and a yang. The response to it is almost like this hyper masculinity, or toxic masculinity, that has put us in a place where, we are chastising our boys for crying or for feeling some kind of pain. And then now, as adults, we're carrying so many burdens, and we have so many issues from a mental, like, health standpoint, because we don't know how to actually, alleviate some of the things or stresses that we're dealing with because we want to be masculine all the time. And so what I am happy about is that there is at least starting to grow a consciousness about mental health, specifically with Black men, dealing with kind of the traumas that we deal with, that we walk around with, walking around in a country where a lot of people are afraid of you. And what that does to you, what that tells you. So I think, the conversations still need to be, that needs to be unpacked. And I haven't really arrived yet where I'm at, but I am excited that there's dialogue, at least around the mental health part.
Speaking more on that, even just like in context of seeing all these traumatic, like I'm smiling because it's so ridiculous. It's not funny, but like, there are dozens and dozens of videos on the internet of just Black people being killed by police. That joint's traumatic. Like, I don't think people realize how desensitized we've become to seeing this over and over again. It's so normalized to the point where people are like, oh, well, if they were doing, like, hold on, did you not just see what just happened?
Right.
Like, have you, so to speak to like mental health, have you ever gone to a therapist or anything just to process some of your thoughts?
I've been talking to I see my therapist once a week for the last probably 3 years.
When did you decide to start?
When I got into, really, it was 2017. It was like in the thick of kind of, my social justice, kind of diving into all of this stuff. And it was just heavy, like trying to deal with being a captain on a team, trying to, be a leader of my family, being a leader in this movement, and all of the backlash and pressure. Like, it was physically manifesting. Like, it felt like for a month that like an elephant was sitting on my chest, and I can feel, that. And I'm like, it got to a point where I was like, I have to talk to somebody. Because there's oftentimes not those, or I didn't feel like I had those safe spaces to be able to just unpack all the things that I was dealing with while I'm trying to save everybody else. And so for me, I've kind of recognized, for me to be any good for a movement, for my daughters, for my family, friends, anybody, I have to be okay, and I have to take care of myself. And I think, since then, there's this constant, like, kind of, in and out of, doing what I got to do for the cause, but also stepping back, taking care of myself, my own mental, because, like you said, this stuff is traumatic, and I don't think people recognize that. Every time we see these videos, like, as a Black man, I see myself, I see my brothers, I see my dad. So to be able to watch these videos over and over and over again, you're watching yourself being murdered over and over and over again. And it's traumatic. And there are these micro, traumas that we don't really take into account. And I think, it's important for us to really check on ourselves, but also, like, check on each other. Like, and I think that's been a good thing. I've had a lot of support from male friends, who been diligent in checking on me, just saying, like, I don't care about football, I don't care about all that stuff. Like, how are you doing? And it's been important for me.
What would you say to people who think they don't need therapy, or just, I don't know, have whatever beliefs they have about how they process emotions or trauma, like just the just keep it moving type of people, I guess?
I think what we have to realize, that we are all going through something. Everybody's dealing with something. And we need spaces to be able to let them go at some point. Do you need to speak to somebody every single week? That depends on you. But I think whether it's a therapist, whether it's, a friend, somebody, we need a safe space to be able to process our emotions, to be able to let go of traumas and process things that might have happened in the past, or even, figure out our anxieties for the future. I think it's important, whether it's therapy or something around that, or just even taking the time to meditate, for 30 minutes. We got so much information that's being pumped to us through social media, through news. Like, our minds are constantly going. We need those spaces where we can just, chill out.
How has it helped or affected you so far in these past few years?
I don't, man. I couldn't even fathom me making it through those 3 years without all that. You know, not to say I was like suicidal or anything, but the amount of pressure that I was feeling, I don't know if I could have sustained that. And so, and even now, it doesn't mean that I'm absent of stress and anxiety. I still deal with anxiety and depression at times. But I know I have at least the space to deal with it, and I have the tools to kind of cope, you know, with that. And I think it's important, you know, for people to at least get equipped with the tools to be able to, you know, manage themselves.
Word. All right. So one final thing, we're just about to wrap it up, coming up on an hour. What advice would you give to young people who want to get involved, or just anybody really who wants to get involved in the fight for justice and equality, and just work to dismantle these systemic racisms or forms of racism, or even just help change one person's mind potentially? What advice would you give to people who want to make a difference?
The first thing is, like, one, you got to be in it for the long haul. There's no quick fix. There's no one thing that you change and then everything's fixed. But it's like anything. Like, I think about it like if you wanted to fix like a watch or something, it's an intricate system, right? That all things are connected to each other. All things have to be placed for it to work. But you have to know how it works in order to dismantle it and rebuild something new. And so I think, especially in this time where we're sitting still, we're getting ready to come up on an election, like, people have to focus and learn and figure out, like, who are the major players that perpetuate the problems that we see. And then how do we dismantle them? And so we focus a lot on the presidential elections, which I hope everybody is registered to vote. If you're not going to oppose, figure out how you can mail your vote, participate in that, because this is probably the most important election of our lifetime. But more importantly, and even, or I would say just as important, are the local elections. Because when we talk about police brutality and who holds police accountable, it's your district attorney. When you talk about, you know, who appoints police chiefs, or you might be able to vote for, sometimes police chiefs are elected officials. Okay, they run the entire police department. We need to, if they're not doing a good job, vote them out. You know, you talk about the mayors, and they control your daily life. They control the city budgets, where if you're putting money into your police departments, or if you're putting them into education, you're putting them into housing, you're putting them into healthcare. All of those things are dealt with on the local level. And we need to start paying attention and putting pressure on those local officials to do what we, the people, want. And if they don't, we beat them up. And then secondly, like, where are we spending our money? I said this earlier, but like, we talk about, you know, we want to support Black business, we want to do those things, but more importantly, behind the scenes, who are the people that are benefiting from private prisons and prison labor, right? Who are financing and perpetuating these systems, that are supporting the systems and benefiting off of the oppression of Black people? Figure those people out and then attack them directly. Because once you figure out how to dismantle, or you take away the people who, you know, protect the system, then we can dismantle it. But until we focus on them, a lot of them, district attorneys all across the country, run unopposed every year. And they're the same ones who do not prosecute cops and then lock up Black people like for nothing, and give us longer terms, give us harsher punishment, and they go unopposed, and we don't even pay attention to them because half of us don't know what a district attorney is. And so we have to first kind of learn about the system in order to dismantle it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, man. You shared so much knowledge. And thank you just for being on and being so open. Really appreciate having you on, bro. Do you want to share where people can follow you, or how to support any of the programs or donations, anything like that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow, you can hit up our website, the MalcolmJenkinsFoundation.org. Also, the PlayersCoalition.org is what the organization myself and Anquan Bolden founded, that deals with social injustice, whether it be education, police, and criminal justice. Malcolm Jenkins is just my handle on Instagram and Twitter. So, you know, you want to stay updated with what I'm doing, follow me. But I encourage everybody, you know, have influence in your sphere, do your part, Be active. You matter. Your voice matters. Your vote matters.
All right. Thank you so much, man.
No problem, brother.